When it comes to U.S. immigration policy, the name Donald Trump always sparks controversy. Under his administration, thousands of families were torn apart, tens of thousands were deported, and the consequences went far beyond the individuals involved. In this video, we're breaking down the 10 states hit hardest by Trump's deportation policies, from sanctuary cities to towns surrounded by ICE, from collapsing hotel industries to factories struggling without workers. The reality is far more complex than you might think. Watch until the end to understand why this policy isn't just a political issue. It's a growing humanitarian crisis across America. Rank 1, California, ground zero in the deportation battle. California, the most populous state in the U.S. and home to the largest undocumented immigrant population, became a prime target under Trump's deportation agenda. Since 2017, ICE launched repeated raids across the state at homes, workplaces, even schools and hospitals. California responded with SB 54, a law designed to protect immigrants, which infuriated the Trump administration and led to threats of cutting federal funding. So, what were the consequences? Thousands were arrested and deported, with many U.S.-born children left behind. The agricultural sector plunged into crisis due to a shortage of fruit pickers, driving prices up. Fear gripped communities. Immigrants were too afraid to go outside, let alone report crimes. ICE detention centers became overcrowded, conditions worsened, and children were held for weeks. But California didn't back down. The state fought back with lawsuits, local protections, and broad support from city and county leaders. Still, the scars of these policies remain: broken families, economic disruption, and deep social division. Rank 2, Texas. A burning border and mass deportations. Texas, sharing a 1,200-mile border with Mexico, was the front line of Trump's aggressive deportation policy. As early as 2017, Trump pushed for building a border wall, ramped up patrols, and empowered ICE to operate heavily in border communities. The Texas state government cooperated closely with federal authorities, passing SB 4, a law allowing local police to detain individuals suspected of being undocumented. The consequences? Deportation numbers surged, especially in cities like El Paso, Laredo, and the Rio Grande Valley. Families were torn apart right at the ports of entry, with children sent to detention centers. A humanitarian crisis unfolded at border shelters. Overcrowding, unsanitary conditions, and inhumane treatment. Tensions exploded between Latino residents and enforcement agencies. Texas also became the symbol of legal and ideological warfare. Governor Greg Abbott stood firmly with Trump, even deploying the National Guard to stop migrants at the border. Texas wasn't just enforcing the policy. It was the ideological battleground where law, humanity, and politics collided head-on. Rank 3, Arizona, a testing ground for hardline policies. Arizona, a desert state bordering Mexico, has long been known for its extreme immigration stance. Under Trump, it became the testing ground for some of the harshest deportation tactics. Even before Trump took office, Arizona passed SB 1070, a controversial law allowing police to demand ID from anyone they suspected of being undocumented. Once Trump came to power, ICE simply ramped things up. The results? A sharp rise in random arrests based on appearance and language. Countless Latino residents were detained, including legal U.S. citizens. Federal courts repeatedly intervened, ruling many Arizona policies unconstitutional. Protests erupted in Phoenix and Tucson, condemning racial profiling and discriminatory enforcement. Arizona became a state deeply divided between those demanding stricter border control and those fighting for civil rights. In the end, Arizona wasn't just a geographic border, it was the front line in the clash between power and justice. Rank 4, Florida. Immigrant communities, living in Fear, Florida, known not just for its beaches and tourism, but also as home to millions of immigrants, especially from Haiti, Cuba, Venezuela, and Central America. Many came to the U.S., fleeing political crises or natural disasters. Under Trump, Florida became a quiet hotspot for deportations where ICE operated aggressively, but under the radar. The state government partnered with ICE through the 287G program, allowing local police to assist in arresting undocumented immigrants. The impact: Haitian communities were hit hard when the Trump administration ended Temporary Protected Status (TPS), leaving thousands at risk of deportation after living in the U.S. for decades. Cuban and Venezuelan immigrants found themselves in limbo, denied legal status, yet unable to return home due to political instability. Fear spread across Latino neighborhoods, especially in Miami-Dade, which once declared itself a sanctuary city, but later began cooperating with ICE. Families were torn apart, children placed in foster care, while their parents were quietly detained and deported in the dead of night. Florida reflects a painful paradox: a state heavily reliant on immigrant labor, yet actively deporting the very people who keep its economy running, leaving communities anxious, unstable, and disillusioned with the system. Rank 5. New York, the stronghold against Trump's deportation agenda. New York, the fourth most populous state in the U.S., home to millions of immigrants from around the globe, stood as one of the country's largest sanctuary cities, where local leaders firmly refused to cooperate with ICE. As Trump escalated deportation efforts, New York declared, "We will not participate," and the standoff began. New York City barred local police from assisting ICE or sharing immigration data. The Trump administration struck back, cutting security funding and blocking access to background check systems used for firearm permit applications. ICE raids still occurred quietly, especially in Queens and the Bronx, leaving immigrant communities in constant fear. The impact: legal aid and human rights centers in New York were overwhelmed, with many wrongful deportation cases reported. Communities like Dominicans, Central Americans, and Africans were hit especially hard, sparking protests across multiple boroughs. The state's trust in the federal government eroded, leading New York to sue the Trump administration dozens of times over constitutional and human rights violations. New York became a symbol of political resistance, a place where human rights were prioritized over federal crackdowns. But that stance came at a cost: increased threats, strained budgets, and a community living under siege. Rank 6. Georgia, ICE crackdowns cripple the food industry. Georgia, the agricultural heart of the American South, saw some of the most aggressive ICE activity during Trump's mass deportation push. The state relies heavily on immigrant labor in poultry plants, farms, and cold storage facilities, especially in areas like Gainesville, Dalton, and Athens. Under Trump, ICE launched large-scale raids, arresting workers directly at poultry processing plants. Local police cooperated closely with ICE under the 287G program, turning county jails into detention centers for undocumented immigrants. Immigrant communities lived in constant fear. Many Latino and Asian families went into hiding, quit their jobs, and avoided schools and hospitals. The consequences were severe. The food industry faced massive labor shortages, forcing some plants to shut down temporarily. Meat and produce prices skyrocketed. Business owners raised alarms, but state leaders continued to back deportation efforts, claiming it protected American jobs. A quiet social crisis spread, especially in small towns dependent on immigrant labor to survive. Georgia became a prime example of a painful paradox. Deporting workers weakens the local economy, but for political reasons. Leaders stuck with hardline policies to the bitter end. Rank 7. North Carolina, Latino immigrants hit the hardest. North Carolina, a fast-growing southern state with a rapidly expanding Latino population, was deeply impacted by Trump's deportation policies. In cities like Charlotte, Raleigh, and Greensboro, immigrants from Mexico, Honduras, and El Salvador made up a large portion of the workforce in construction, restaurants, and service industries. When Trump ramped up deportations, ICE increased raids in neighborhoods and workplaces, leaving Latino communities in a constant state of fear. Traffic stops became a major threat. Minor violations often led to arrests and ICE referrals. State police worked closely with ICE through the 287G program, making Show Me Your Papers a daily fear for many. The consequences were painful. Many Latino families were torn apart, with children left behind when parents were deported. Schools reported rising absenteeism. As students feared their families would be taken, communities became isolated. People avoided hospitals, public services, and even filing taxes. North Carolina stands as a stark reminder of the quiet suffering within Latino immigrant communities, where those who lived, worked, and contributed for decades were suddenly pushed to the margins of society. Rank 8. Nevada. Tourism industry. Hit hard by immigrant labor shortage. Nevada, famous for glitzy Las Vegas and its booming tourism industry, was among the states most severely impacted by Trump's deportation crackdown. Tens of thousands of undocumented immigrants worked in casinos, hotels, restaurants, and cleaning services. But as ICE raids intensified, Nevada began to feel the weight of a growing labor crisis. The reality on the ground: many undocumented workers were arrested on the job, especially in service roles along the Las Vegas Strip. Businesses faced staffing shortages, unable to replace workers willing to take on low-wage, physically demanding jobs. Some hotel chains reduced service hours or temporarily shut down housekeeping and laundry departments. The social impact: remaining workers lived in fear, avoiding work or public spaces unless absolutely necessary. Immigrant communities from the Philippines, Mexico, and El Salvador were hit especially hard, even though many had lived in Nevada for over a decade. Tourism tax revenue declined, prompting state officials to urge the federal government to take a more flexible approach. Nevada is proof that when immigrants are removed from the system, the industries that depend on them quickly unravel, even in a city that never sleeps like Las Vegas. Rank 9. Illinois. Chicago. A sanctuary city. Gripped by fear, Illinois, with Chicago at its heart, declared itself a sanctuary state early on, refusing to cooperate with ICE in detaining and deporting immigrants. But that didn't stop controversial raids from happening. Chicago, home to large communities from Mexico, Guatemala, and the Middle East, became a legal and political battleground between local authorities and the federal government. Key developments: Chicago's mayor pledged not to assist ICE, refusing to share residency data or detain immigrants without a court order. Still, ICE carried out arrests outside homes and workplaces, sparking outrage as videos of these incidents went viral. Mistaken arrests of legal residents and documented immigrants fueled public anger and increased protests. Real-world impact: trust in the federal government plummeted within immigrant communities. Lawyers and human rights groups were overwhelmed trying to support detainees. Tensions rose between Chicago police and ICE, leading to growing security concerns. Illinois especially. Chicago became a symbol of legal resistance and humanitarian defiance. But behind the scenes, countless families were still torn apart by sudden and traumatic deportations. Rank 10. Mississippi. The 2019 factory raid that shocked the nation. Mississippi, one of the poorest states in America, made national headlines during Trump's presidency, with the largest immigration raid in over a decade. In August 2019, ICE simultaneously stormed 7 food processing plants across small towns like Morton and Canton. The result, nearly 700 Latino workers were arrested in a single day, most of them undocumented. Yet many had lived and worked in the U.S. for years. Immediate consequences. Families were torn apart. Hundreds of children came home from school only to find their parents gone. Relying on neighbors or churches for temporary care, fear gripped immigrant communities. Many quit their jobs, fled the state, or went into hiding. Schools, churches, and local charities were overwhelmed, providing emergency food, shelter, and emotional support. The controversial reality: factory owners faced no criminal charges, while low-income workers were detained, imprisoned, and deported. Heart-wrenching footage of crying children who lost their parents shocked the nation, becoming a haunting symbol of Trump-era deportation policies. Mississippi became a painful reminder of the human cost behind harsh immigration enforcement, where even hardworking, low-wage laborers were shown no mercy. Deportation doesn't just take away papers, it takes away dreams, families, and the safety of millions. What happened in these 10 states is a stark warning: when inhumane policies are enforced with force, the entire society ends up paying the price. But what do you think? Leave a comment below. And share this video if you believe more people need to hear this. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth, eye-opening, and sometimes shocking insights into modern-day America. See you in the next video.